Welcome back to another episode of Fret Buzz the podcast. Today we're going to get into part 2 with Marc Beneteau of Beneteau Guitars. In today's episode, we first talk about Don Ross playing Beneteau guitars. Then we dive into humidity and what that does for an acoustic guitar. We also dive into the different woods and the effect that each one of them actually has. Then we get into a conversation about buying a custom guitar versus factory made and this idea of old versus new. Marc also educates us on a process called torifying, which helps age the top of the guitar and thus ages the sound. And lastly, we end up on CNC versus handcrafted and why Marc prefers handcrafting all of his guitars. And quickly, I do want to mention that Fret Buzz the podcast is coming up on its 50th episode. We've got some really good guests coming up. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. Make sure that you are tuned in every Thursday. If you do enjoy what's going on, head on over to iTunes and give us a review. It does help us out. And if you'd like to support Fret Buzz the podcast, head on over to patreon.com and check out our page there. Also, I do want to mention that we do have the Songwriters Club at fretbuzzthepodcast.com, where we go live on YouTube once a month and we give feedback on all of our tunes. They may be new tunes, they may be old tunes, but nonetheless, we do enjoy the process of talking about our music. So if you'd like to join, head on over to fretbuzzthepodcast.com and submit your tune. And lastly, if you have any feedback or comments about any one of the shows or topics that we've talked about, or would like to talk about something that you would like to see in the future, email me at aaron@fretbuzzthepodcast.com. I'd love to have a conversation with you and get a little back and forth going. Well, I think that takes care of everything. So without further ado, let's get into part 2 with Marc Beneteau of Beneteau Guitars on Fret Buzz, the podcast.
I've been learning some of Don's music, and a lot of his tunings are, Klimbim, you drop the low E string down to a C, and to a B, sorry, and then Michael, you tune it down to a C, and the guitar sounds at least my guitar sounds, I don't know, flabby, floppy. It just doesn't sound right. Like, it's just not meant to be tuned down that far.
Do you know what scale length your guitar is?
I should, but I don't actually.
You don't need to. It doesn't matter. But that's an indication that the scale length isn't long enough for the string. If you were going to play that string all the time, I guess you could put a heavier string on it. It wouldn't give you the full spectrum, but it would stop it from being too floppy. But again, you probably do that for one string or one song, and then you tune back up, for the next song.
That's exactly what I do. Yeah.
So that makes it tough.
I guess that's why people have multiple guitars on stage with them.
Right. That's right.
You need a guitar for those low tunings.
Yeah. So you're more recently getting into acoustic, kind of modern acoustic music, but these players?
Me personally, yes.
Yeah.
When I gig, I usually have a looping pedal and the Gibson ES335, and depending on where I'm playing, I'm either at a bar or oceanfront stage. Usually people want cover music for the most part, but I'll sneak in jazz tunes and whatever else, and I need to be very versatile.
Yeah.
It's the guys like Dustin Furlow and Matt Thomas around. There's not a whole lot of them, but guys that are that make one guitar sound like 3 people without any electronics. And I started getting interested in being able to do that, and the more I've looked into it and listened, I think I heard Dustin actually turned me on to Don Ross, and because I was into Tommy Emmanuel and hadn't done my research getting outside of that, and I put on Klimbim, and my jaw kind of dropped, and then I listened to it again, and then I listened to it again, and I think I listened to it like at least 5 times in a row, and then I ran and got my wife, and I was like, "You have to hear this. This is the most amazing sounding song." And then I was on a quest to learn how to play that from that moment. And the next 2 weeks of my life were devoted to klimbim.
Wow.
And try to play it every couple days now. But yeah, I love it, and that's why getting to talk with you is special, because you're on the leading edge, as I see it, of these really high end acoustic guitars. And if somebody like Don Ross is playing your guitars, that speaks worlds to your methods and your product.
Well, thanks. It's really quite exciting, because there's so many good players out there now. I mean, this sort of new style of acoustic guitar playing is solo acoustic guitar playing. All of them are different. There's so many great players, and what I'm finding is that most of the people that I deal with, my customers, are just really enthusiastic, and a lot of them are really good players, in my opinion. They're not professionals, but there's just such a renaissance of guitar playing now that it's quite exciting, and I get this from people all over the world. It's really cool.
Yeah, you're in a good spot, because with the internet, there really has been a renaissance of acoustic guitar music.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody learns off each other, and inspires each other, and and now you have access to pretty well any player that's doing YouTube videos, so that's really something. Yeah, it's great. I really quite enjoy this stage, I guess, in the development of the guitar.
Yeah. And then you said you obviously started off playing guitar all the way back in the 70s. Do you play with anybody? And
I'm embarrassed to say that I don't play much at all. I my grandson is 20 years old, and he's a really fine guitar player. Like he came up in the kind of a punk band kind of player. But he's quite talented, and he's kind of kick-started me into playing again. I kind of let it go. I build guitars all the time, but I don't force myself to play. Like I used to love it. I played in rock bands all as a young person and a young guy. Some acoustic guitar. But the other side of it is that the players now are so good that. I mean, it's amazing how good they are, and I basically, I just play simple stuff, and so I enjoy it, and I'm not bad or anything, but there's such a difference between what was good 20 years ago and what's good now. It's so really good, and there's no reason not to play, but I just. Well, I'll tell you something. Okay, we're getting out of winter, even though you wouldn't know it today. It's just a few degrees above freezing, and so it's not a nice day today. But typically, I have actually, and again, I'm kind of ashamed of this, but I've left my guitar in its case all winter. Because normally, for me to play, I like to have it out on the stand like this, and so I can just grab it. And I'm not as inspired to go get the case out, get the guitar out, and sit down and play. So if the guitar's sitting right there, boom, I'll pick it up and I'll play. So we're getting into playing season now. So I'm, that's all I can say.
Yeah, I think that goes for a lot of guitarists across the world, where it is, for some odd reason, if it's sitting in that case, you're less inclined to go grab it. Whereas if it is sitting off to the side, it's you're more inclined to grabbing it. But unfortunately, if it is just sitting out, it's exposed to the elements, and
that's why I keep it in the case in the winter. Keep the humidifier in it. But now we're past that season. We're fine. So I can just keep it out and play it.
Yeah.
We had on a local luthier in my region, Larry Burwald. He was on somewhere in the teens, I think, in our like episode 10 to 20 kind of range, and he really brought up he drove home the point of humidifying your either your guitar case or the space that your guitars are sitting out in. And now I have a humidifier going, and I have my humidity sensor, And what I've noticed over the past few days as it's spring maybe it hasn't hit you up in Canada, but it has hit Virginia Beach. It is very humid. And right now I'm at 58% humidity. Is that too much? Is that bad for my guitars now?
Take your humidifier out of your guitar case.
Well, there's no, it's not on right now.
Okay,
it's just naturally that humid right now.
Yeah, you don't want it too humid. It's not high humidity is not going to damage the guitar like low humidity will, but it's not good. I'll give you a very quick anecdote. One of my very first guitars back when I was still living in Ottawa. I was in my first shop, which was a spare bedroom in the house we rented, and I built a guitar and sold it to my neighbor. And my neighbor was a bit of a do-it-yourself guy, and back then there was they probably still have them. They were called dampets. They're like a tube with sponge in it, and that's how you humidify your guitar.
Yep.
You soak the tube, right? Well, he said, well, I don't need to do that. I can make my own. So he made his own homemade dampet, and he brought the guitar over to me a while later, and the thing looked like a balloon. It had pumped right up because it was so saturated with humidity. So luckily, we got rid of his dampet, and it came back down to normal. But high humidity is not particularly good for the instrument. 58%, you're fine. I don't know what they build Taylors at. I build my guitars at around 45%, sort of in the middle. It can handle going in either direction. But yeah, as I mentioned with mine, even here, I mean, we are getting into spring too, not today, but I can throw away the humidifier, not really, but you know what I mean, for the summer until late fall, and I can tell generally if your heat's coming on in the house, if your heater's in the house, your furnace is on, then you probably have to start thinking about it, And if you have a humidity indicator, that's your way of telling. So for me, once we get into starting of spring, I can leave the damp off, or the humidifier off of it, and just put it out, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Can we jump over to woods?
Sure.
For building guitars, that's one of the things that I really, really want to talk about, and there's all these different woods out there now, and I have, like, this one's got Ovencall back and sides, and everybody's always talking about the rosewood gives it a shimmery overtones, and the mahogany's darker. So this is a two-part question for you. One, what is your take on different woods and the quality of sound that is produced? And two, what is your process for selecting woods, going out and getting them, and then how do you deal with the changing regulations?
Okay. Things have really changed in the guitar world. And one of the biggest changes is the internet. And the internet has caused rumor, and it has caused thinking to kind of get really skewed. Okay? So what happens now is people go on the internet, and they see that, like you said, certain wood has a shimmer to it, and that starts cycling around, and then it gets repeated, and next thing you know, those woods are great, those woods are bad, these woods sound like this, that wood sounds like that, and really, I dare you to do a blind test. You'd be amazed at how surprised you'd be at how a lot of this stuff is just rumor. Every piece of wood is different. Certainly different woods have different general characteristics, but let's say for the back and sides don't do nearly as much as you'd think towards the tone of the guitar. They color the tone, but they don't make the tone. Most of the tone comes from the top. There's that famous story about Torres, the classical guitar builder in the 1860s, who built a guitar with paper mache back and sides, and it sounded good. Well, who knows how much reality that is, but that puts the point across that most of the sound comes from the top. And so That's a tough one because I'm always dealing with that with customers who are looking for a certain wood because they heard that it's going to give a certain sound. And in the back and sides, there are certain differences between the softer woods like mahogany and walnut and koa to an extent, and compare them to the harder woods like the rosewoods or the bubingas. They will definitely give you a slightly different voice. But not as much as you'd think. So the difference between one wood and another wood are generally pretty subtle, if indistinguishable, depending on the woods you're talking about. Okay. And that's a tough one because customers don't want to hear that. They want to hear that this wood is going to be boom, like nothing you've ever heard of before. And the point is, you can make a great sounding guitar out of lots of different woods. And so sometimes it just comes down to aesthetics. And that's literally what I do with customers to an extent. I'll sort of try and find out what they like. I find out what kind of sound they want so I can steer them to a general category of woods and then narrow it down by which one appeals to you, because I think you have to like your guitar. I think that's important. You have to like what it looks like. You have to like everything about it. So, that's another part of the factor. The back and side woods, as far as the restrictions, well, that's changed a lot. In CITES, we're talking about the CITES regulations, which are the restrictions on the certain restricted woods. You guys in the U.S. don't have it as bad. Builders in the U.S. don't have it as bad. I'll probably get pushback on this, but the fact is, your average American builder could probably build guitars for an entire lifetime and never have to export one because your market is so big that's easy. That's probably pretty easy to do. I'm talking small shop builders. I'm not talking about the big companies. Of course, they export, but you could easily make a career and never export a guitar. And whereas in Canada, we can't do that. Our market is 1/10 the size of yours. So in order to make a career, I have to export. So I sell to customers all over the world, including quite a few into the U.S. So I've had to deal with this CITES, and it involves I have to catalog and they register every piece of restricted wood I have, including like little things like bridge plates, headstock veneers, pieces for binding, everything, backs and sides, everything. So I have to apply for that. It might take a month to get the paperwork. So I'm starting at guitars now, and one will be African blackwood. Trying to think if there's any other CITES woods in there, but I have to apply for that. I'll apply for that now so that by the time the guitar is finished, I'll have the paperwork. It'll be ready to go, and it has to go out with the guitar. And you get sent 2 originals, and they get sent out with the guitar. So you better hope that UPS doesn't lose it, because then you have to reapply for new ones. But that's my reality. It's the new reality. Now, added to that, I've talked to the CITES people recently, and they said there may be some changes coming to ease the restrictions on guitar or instrument makers, which makes sense. I'll give you an example. I've got a guitar going out, and it has, what's that? It has Bubinga bindings, okay? That's not a lot of wood when you add up the wood for the bindings and the little tiny bits. Right. And so that probably comes out to an ounce or 2 of wood. And I have to get CITES paperwork for that guitar because of that tiny bit of wood. Now gets a little silly, as opposed to, countries that are importing, thousands of pounds of wood, So, I mean, I think there may be some changes coming. I'm hoping that's supposed to happen this month. And I'm very hopeful that they will ease the restrictions to some extent for builders, like small shop builders especially, because we don't really use a lot of wood. What we do use, we guard very carefully.
Have you ever been on trips to exotic places to actually pick out this wood?
I wish. No, I haven't.
Maybe it's time for vacation.
Yeah.
Work vacation.
No, I haven't, and that's interesting. I don't think it would be. I don't think you could do that. I don't think you could just go down there and buy a rosewood log and have it shipped home. There's so many restrictions on that kind of stuff right now. But about 20 years ago, I got a call from a local guy here, and he says, "You interested in some rosewood?" And I've heard that before, and I go, "Well, maybe. You never know." And he said, "Okay." So he said, "Meet me at this small mill, just like a small yard where they were milling local lumber." And he had a pile of rosewood logs that he had bought into a pallet that came up from Belize. So it was Honduran rosewood. And this stuff had been sitting out, and it was cracked to hell. I mean, it was just horrible looking, but I took a chance on it, and I actually got quite a bit of lumber out of it by very careful cutting. I brought it to another mill, and they cut it the way I wanted it, and I ended up getting wood out of it, and I still have a little bit of it, but it was way more work than it was worth. But that was an interesting experience, like all these little rosewood logs.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So you don't have any? Do you have any foreign contacts that you work with that ship you wood consistently?
No, and that would be. I don't think I could do that because of the restrictions, you can't just import wood as a guitar maker. You used to be able to do that. But luckily here in Ontario, within 2 hours of me, I have 2 world-class wood companies, wood importing and sell, companies that they have wood from all over the world, and they're great. And I get to go there. I go there. I've got a trip planned soon, and I go there and I just see what they have. And they have, I mean, even for me, and I've been in this business all this time, they have woods that I've never heard of, So there's always interesting stuff. And I buy my wood in lumber form. I don't buy guitar sets generally because it's way more expensive to do it that way. I have a good bandsaw. I can process guitar sets myself. And so that's my preferred method of doing it. So, we're lucky we have access. I imagine if I lived out in the prairie somewhere or, anywhere but here, I mean, there's lots of places where you couldn't do that. You couldn't just go and pick out wood yourself. You'd have to rely on suppliers to send you guitar sets and stuff. And I do that to some extent with certain woods, but generally speaking, we're lucky here to have the access to these companies that have this great wood.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I imagine it's pretty fun to find something that you're unfamiliar with and kind of take a chance on it and see what you end up with.
It's fantastic. I mean, I just, I go there and it's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna see what treasures am I gonna find?
Yeah.
Fortunately, it's really extensive, but what the hell?
Yeah, absolutely.
Part of the reason I got I'm asking you all these questions about going out to find these woods. I went, my wife and I went on our honeymoon to India, which sounds crazy to some people, but
I think
that's fascination. Yeah. But anyway, so the whole time I'm trying to I wanted to see somebody playing the sitar. Like I wanted to hear somebody like Ravi Shankar playing sitar. And I finally found this music shop, and I met the guy who owned the little shop and set up a sitar lesson in his shop with him. And then from that, I actually ended up purchasing a sitar from him, and it's sitting. I don't know if you can see the
exactly.
See that? Let me see if I can.
Cool. That's
cool. It's a really cool instrument, but I had this flash of like sitars are really expensive to get in the United States,
right?
And
I know
I got it for like $500 with the conversion, and then there were shipping costs. But I had this there. It was more than a quick thought about like this guy had totally wanted to set up a business deal with me to ship sitars to the United States. I was like, if you were willing to go out to the source and import them yourself, even if it cost you after shipping $700 and you were able to sell sitars for $2,000 in the United States, you could make a lot of
sense.
money. So I would imagine if you were willing to go out and find contacts in Africa or Central America or whatever, I would think that could be a lucrative thing. Obviously, you've got plenty to work on, plenty to keep you busy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think I could do that, but it's a great idea. Once you do it and you send me
fancy woods,
yeah,
that'd be a great job. I get to go on trips.
Yeah,
go
sure.
To the exotic places.
That's what Bob Taylor does.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess he's gotten to that stage. He probably has people doing all the dirty work for him. All the dirty work.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I imagine over the years, since you've been doing this for quite a while, that the price of certain woods have fluctuated quite a bit as the demand for certain woods go up and down.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of ones that have gone down. That's the harder one.
Right.
And actually, I'm trying to think like a wood that has never. I don't know about you guys, what you guys think. In the electric guitar world, it's different, but in the acoustic guitar world, I love maple, but I can't sell a maple guitar, even a nicely figured one. And so that's a wood that I kind of would have liked to have used more, and is still relatively reasonable to buy as far as price goes. And it makes a beautiful guitar, but I haven't been able to generate any sales. I have over a 2-year waiting list right now, and I have one maple guitar in there, and it's the first maple guitar that I will have built in probably 10 years.
Wow.
There's one example. Most of the woods have kind of stuck around and gone up in price, and mahogany has gotten more expensive. South American mahogany is partially restricted. I know that. So we're switching to other ones. I'm actually in the process of trying to find a suitable replacement for my neck wood, because I've always used mahogany. I love mahogany for the necks. It works really well. Right. There are other mahoganies. I've tried African mahogany, and so far it hasn't really worked out the same. So I'm in the process of trying to find a substitute for that. Yeah.
If anybody out there knows of a strong, let us know. We'll pass that on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Can you give us, so your typical guitarist out there, probably, can't afford to go to a custom builder. And I mean, I know from my own personal experience, I didn't even know custom builders. I mean, I knew it existed, but it wasn't something that I had put much thought into.
We come out of the woodwork, and there are, depending where you are, there's quite a few. It's still a bit of a rarity, I mean, I could ask, I live in a town of 35,000 people, and I bet you if you ask the average person on the street, even guitar player, they wouldn't know anything about custom builders, even in this town. So, unless you're really focused on that end of the guitar world, it's not that common. Anyway, you were going to ask about what would I suggest to somebody who's can't afford a custom build guitar?
Well, that's part of my question. My other, if you've grown up with, everyone has dreams of getting, like, at least if you don't know about the custom guitars, your big three are Taylor, Martin, and Gibson right now, I think is the general consensus.
Yeah.
Could you maybe speak to the quality of those guitars and maybe compare, like, at what point would you want to go Beneteau or Larrivee or another custom built guitar over those?
Well, that's a good question, because they're all well-built guitars, all of them. They're all. I don't know much about Gibson now. I really don't see them around much. I'm not really aware of them too much. But I mean, these companies have all been around a long time, and they, presumably do a good job. I think there's a special mojo with a hand built that's different, and there's something in this modern world that's kind of special about going to an actual craftsman who builds your guitar. But having said that, there's no reason why you can't get quite a good guitar if you stick with the regular, the big three, for example, right? And now, because I don't know their lines, I don't know the difference between their different. I'm sure they have different lines where some are, sort of their higher end guitars that are built with their better materials. But I mean, everybody covets a 1930s Martin if it's in great shape, because they've been building great guitars for a long time. And I'm assuming they still build really good guitars. But it's a matter when you've got a big factory like that. I think that you have to pick and choose the guitar rather than pick by model. You'd have to try the guitar because they're all going to be a little different, and you might pick up one that's just an absolute gem. Everything comes together and the guitar sounds fantastic. So there's no reason why you can't do that. And if you're looking for a decent guitar, and you obviously can't afford, the high price of a hand built, my suggestion is that you don't buy sight unseen. If hopefully you live near a music store that has a good stock and you can go in and try instruments. And I did that with a friend of mine who's retired, and he wanted to learn how to play guitar. And so I took him down to my little mom and pop guitar shop here, and we looked through a whole bunch of $300 guitars, and one just stood out. It was just, it played well, it sounded better, and, it was the same price as the others. So that's the one I said, here, this is the one you want. Buy this one because it sounds better. And he wouldn't have been able to do that on his own. So that's my suggestion, is that you take the time to try instruments and find the one that speaks to you. And it doesn't matter what the price is. If it works, if you like it, then that's all that's important.
Do you think that for the price, you've got these historic Martin models that go for thousands and thousands of dollars?
Yeah.
And then you can also buy like top of the line hand-built guitar for similar price, and many times, I mean, sometimes the historic ones are even more expensive. But do you think that a new guitar can sound, without the wood aging in the guitar doing its thing over time, do you think that a new guitar is going to sound as good but with better setup?
A properly made new guitar is probably a better bet from a structural standpoint. A guitar that's been around a long time may have some structural compromises. It's going to have that patina of sound that because it's so old, there's something that happens to the tone over time. It gets a bit of brittleness, if I can describe it like that, has a real, it would be very difficult to replicate that in a brand new guitar. With a brand new, it's like, okay, do you want this 1964 Chevy, or do you want this 2019 Chevy? The 2019's got lots of bells and whistles that the other one doesn't have, and it's probably everything's brand new. But the old one's got the mojo, I mean, I restore motorcycles as a hobby, a vintage British motorcycle. So I have a 1971 Norton, and it is ultra cool. But if somebody got off of their new Suzuki and got on this thing, they think, wow, what's this thing? But it's charm. And that's the thing with an old guitar, is I totally get why people are just passionate about vintage instruments. I have a feeling for that myself, even though I don't have any. I had a 1920 Martin Uke, but I don't have it anymore. But I totally get it, and that means a lot when you're choosing an instrument, because you're willing, if you absolutely feel passionate about this instrument and about the whole history of it, let's say it's a 1945 Martin, then you're going to overlook the shortcomings, if there are some, and there usually are some, because the other part of it speaks so much to you. But if you want a working tool, and a really good hand built from a good builder or a good factory made guitar is probably your better bet, because it's got structurally it's going to be really good. It will have good. It should have really good tone, though it won't have that age tone. One way that you might be able to get the age tone is to go with a torrefied top. Are you guys familiar with that at all?
No,
I'm not. No.
Okay, the torrefied top is this process that's been introduced fairly recently, in which they take regular top wood, your spruce, and they put it in a kiln. And if I don't have this exactly correct, then my apologies. You'll probably hear about it. But
send all letters to.
Yeah.
They heat it up with an absence of oxygen. Okay, that's the difference. You don't just heat it up. It's not like a kiln where you just heat it. You heat it with the absence of oxygen. What it does is the top wood, not only does it come out with a kind of a golden color, it just changes the color of the wood, but it's like it ages it so that it sounds like a 20-year-old top coming out of this oven. And it's an interesting thing. The jury's still out for me, even though it's been used and successfully by Martin and other well-respected companies. So I have to take that into consideration. I just haven't had a lot of personal experience. I just had some of my tops torrefied so that I would have them on hand, and I'm really looking forward to trying it. And what that's supposed to do is it gives you that aged sound right out of the box. Don't know what the long-term ramifications are going to be, but it's an interesting concept, and it's being used. Now, I've used maple in that way. I used maple that had been the same process had been used on this maple, and I was using this maple for bindings, and I went through, I don't know how many bindings, but they all broke because it made the wood so brittle that I barely got 4 pieces out of 30 that didn't break when I tried to bend them.
Oh, wow.
So, that makes me a little leery. I don't know if that affects if that just applies to the top wood or not, but for what it's worth, it's an interesting process, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. Thanks for letting us know about that.
Yeah.
Keep my eyes out.
Yeah.
Do you have any interest in building any instruments aside from guitars? I think I saw on your studio tour you do build some ukuleles.
Yeah, I've done some ukes. I love ukes. I don't advertise them much. It's not like I'm looking for uke sales, because I can't get enough. Ukes don't bring as much money. Obviously, they don't even bring proportionally enough money, because they're still like building a small guitar. So that they have almost the same complexity as a guitar. So it's not economically feasible. I think to be a uke builder, a uke builder, you have to build a lot of them. You have to have this kind of a production line going, and as soon as things start sounding like a production line, I run the other direction, because I don't like that idea. There are small shop builders, solo builders like myself, who build enormous numbers of guitars, and to do that, you have to really set up a production. It's got to be like a little factory. And even though I've built close to 800 guitars in my career, I can't. I would hate to have it go to that point, because I really like being able to hand do a lot of the stuff.
Oh yeah, and there's a story that goes along with each build, and having that relationship with that customer, and that kind of builds into, like you were talking about before, the mojo of the guitar.
Oh yeah, for sure. And another thing that I do is that, and I find this happens a lot, more and more probably, is that customers will ask me if I can take photos along the building process, and I can't do that a lot. I mean, but I do it, and I know that it's really cool for the customer to see the instrument come together, and that's a cool part of the process, and it brings you back to the fact that you're dealing with the craftsman who's actually building the guitar. Another thing is I don't use CNC. which is very common nowadays. You see a lot of incredible looking detail, and you know that it was pretty well done by CNC, you know, routers. I don't do that. I'm old school. I like, and I'm happy with that. The only CNC stuff I do is I have my B logo made, because, you know, that's just repeating. So I have those cut, but I inlay them. And other than that, whatever I do old school. I was a tool and die apprentice for a very short time, until I realized I just wanted to play guitar instead of go to work. And I've got a great love for fine metalworking, which is, you know, a lot of production stuff, a lot of like old school stuff, computer controlled stuff was just really fine setup and like metalworking techniques. And I use a lot of that in my shop. I have a metal lathe, so I've made some of my own tooling. And I mean, if you know, all you have to do is look at a typewriter from 1910 and see that's fine work. That's like really an interesting and intricate little machine, you know, to tell that you can do a lot of really good work without having to resort to CNC. I'm not against it. It's just not my comfort zone. And I think that you can do great work without it.
What does CNC stand for?
Computer, oh God, you would ask me that. I don't know. Magic, it's magic.
Yeah. Because when you first said it, I didn't know what you were talking about. But when you started talking about it, I understood what you were referring to.
Programming a machine with a router, for example, to cut very intricate. You know, you program it. So if you can program it, you can do this all. You know, you can watch it, and then, you know, you don't have to go in and do it all by hand, which is, you know, there's two different skills, and I like the old world skill of doing it by hand, even though I can't get as complex as you can with the you know, the program. I don't know, it just means something to me, you know. I like to say that I can do that. I just feel like it's a skill that is valuable to me, to know that, you know, if I have to come up with something, I can do it by hand. My neck, for example, a lot of people have the necks carved with a CNC machine, and then they just finish them off. Well, I think, and I might have it wrong here, but I think you have to have a different program for every different neck shape. Whereas somebody comes to me, like I get this all the time, I want the neck and I want it slight V shape, and I want it, you know, this kind of thing, this width and all this stuff. Well, I just carve it. You know, I do it with the old school way with the hand tools, and I can vary it as much as I need to get it just where they want it. Or I can copy something that already exists. I've got somebody who's asking for a tailor neck, and that's the thing about tailors, right? The necks are really, really easy to play.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to find that model and take some copies of the shape of the neck, but I'll be able to do that, and they come up with a pretty good facsimile.
Awesome. Well, I know Aaron's got a sick child.
Yes. It's life, unfortunately. Yeah. But thank you. We really do appreciate your taking the time to speak with us today. It's been an amazing conversation.
Well, this has been really fun. I really like this. This is great. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I've loved getting to. I've been going through so much of this in my interest in acoustic guitars, to be able to ask you all these questions that I've been reading on forums, and it's just not the same as asking someone who does this professionally, who builds these and really knows the answers on a deeper level. Yeah. So hopefully this has provided value to our listeners, and
and I highly suggest everybody go out and check out the video of his studio, of his shop. It's a great video. It's
wow, cool. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, and listen to Don Ross playing Beneteau guitars. I imagine he uses them in the studio too, because that's what any of his videos on YouTube have.
He uses
Beneteau
exclusively.
Yeah, so you can hear the incredible sound combined with his incredible skill.
Yeah, and Dustin Furlow as well.
Yeah, and Dustin Furlow's using a Beneteau.
Yeah. There's a lot of them out there.
Where can everybody go to find out more about you?
Well, my website is benetauguitars.com, and Beneteau. For those who think I'm Italian, I'm not. I'm French. That's the first place, and they can contact me. They can email me, and I'm always happy to answer questions.
Awesome.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Hope you have a great rest of your weekend.
Yeah, we're doing some painting this afternoon. We're going over to paint my daughter's ceiling, so that's gonna be really fun.
Oh yeah. Painting ceilings is hard. It's a big shoulder workout.
Yeah, I know. That's horrible. I won't be able to walk with it.
And you get that nice splatter on your face too.
That's right. All
Well,
right.
thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. And
So did I. I had a good time. Thank you.
yeah, awesome. Yeah.
Mark, have a great day painting.
Take care, man.
All right, bye. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Mark.
Bye.